First off, I'd like to acknowledge that we are recording this podcast on stolen land. From where I'm presiding today is the Wurundjeri land of the Kulin Nation. Today, for our Green Left podcast, we are interviewing Clifton D'Rozario, who is elected leader of the Communist Party of India, Marxist-Leninist Liberation in India. Clifton has extensive experience as a labour lawyer representing workers in the fight for their rights, and this is often in the context of fierce repression. He has also been involved in winning union representation for Dalit sanitation workers who carry out the extremely hazardous job of manually unblocking sewer pipes in Bangalore. Clifton is also going to be a feature speaker at the upcoming Ecosocialism 2023, a World Beyond Capitalism conference being hosted by Green Left that is taking place on July 1st to July 2nd in Melbourne at the Victorian Trades Hall. He will be a feature speaker on the panel titled The Fight for Democracy in India, Is Modi Fascist?, where he will be giving his eyewitness report. We have Clifton here today to have a bit of an interview and discussion, around different kind of topics related to kind of Indian politics. But really, we're wanting to kind of have a discussion with him about, really what is the nature of the Modi government. To start off, Clifton, in Australia, we recently just had Prime Minister Modi visit where he was met with this glowing reception from sections of the Indian community in Australia, but he was also met with a lot of glowing reception from politicians as well, but from both sides of the political spectrum within Australia. Now, we've often heard this thing that the international community and the liberal media have described Modi as a reformer that enjoys great popularity within India, but at the same time, he is described as a tyrant and is even an outright fascist who has seen a weakening of democratic institutions. And I guess, Clifton, I want to hear sort of, from your perspective, can you give us a bit of background on Modi's rise to power in 2014?
Yeah, I guess the response that one is talking about, of course, the recent Australia experience is quite interesting. Now there is some amount of information coming out on the manner in which that entire program was actually organized, the manner in which the crowd, at least from what I've given to understand, a stadium which was not full, but the manner in which the crowd was actually orchestrated over there. So some bit of information seems to be coming on that. And that in a way also, the entire megalomania of the man kind of, it kind of comes out in that entire kind of program that they organize. Now, I think, there is no consistency at this point in time in terms of how the international order actually looks at Modi, if you look at it from a time frame point of view. Now, 20 years ago, he was a persona non grata who was not even allowed to visit some of the countries, given the role that he played in the genocide that took place in the state of Gujarat, of which he was the chief minister. But 20 years later, now he's been heralded as the boss. I think as the Australian premier seems to have introduced him. I think there is also a political and economic rationale to this entire shift. I think worldwide we're seeing a rightward shift, and this is in the context of a global capitalism, which is where capital is in a deep crisis, but is also on an offensive. So when you see the kind of fascism that we are seeing in India, it's mirrored by a rightward shift in several other countries. And generally, I think this kind of economy, this capitalism in crisis, it's germane ground for this kind of regimes to come up. And of course, then for these regimes to prop up each other. So I think in this kind of an international economic situation, to expect any kind of opposition to Modi, I think, or any other authoritarian or majoritarian leader, I think is not possible. So there's obviously going to be collaboration. There's obviously going to be legitimization. And from the Australian point of view, I think that relationship has been growing for some time. The manner in which the governments kind of came together to ensure that Adani gets a contract for coal mining in Australia, which was facilitated by the Australian government. And of course, Modi then ensured that the kind of funds that was required for that project was given to Adani from the banks. So this collaboration and legitimization by the international order is really not, out of the ordinary. Now, coming to Modi, I think one needs to understand Modi's ascent to power. it's essential to understand the Hindu supremacist organization called the RSS, the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, which is the national volunteer organization. Formed in 1925, it has a particular vision of this of India, which is completely contrary to what at that point in time the freedom fighters were fighting for, and of course now, which is completely contrary to what the Constitution stands for. So this organization, has been mobilizing it for the last 100 years in various ways to try and establish its notion of what this country should be, which is primarily a Hindu majoritarian state. Modi comes from those tables. He joined that basically the RSS has these local branches which runs in various areas and villages, which basically are indoctrination camps. Now he, as a young boy of 8 years old, was part of those camps, continued to be associated with the RSS, became a full timer with the RSS sometime in the 1960s, late 1960s, and there grew in the RSS itself. And of course, his skills, his organization skills, his flair for rhetoric, and of course his flair for inflammatory anti-Muslim, anti-Christian kind of speeches is something that helped him progress in the RSS. Somewhere in 2001, he was then basically from RSS, which is the mother organization, as you can say, which has several fronts. The BJP, or the Bharatiya Janata Party, is the political front of the RSS. Now, RSS controls more or less everything that's done, in terms of the policies that the BJP undertakes, the kind of decisions it makes, so on and so forth. And very important positions of the BJP are held by people who are from the RSS. So the RSS parachuted Modi to Gujarat as the chief minister in 2001. And what we see after that, of course, is something that the Gujarat, the Godhra incident, where you had this absolutely horrific train fire where 59 Hindus died who were coming back from Uttar Pradesh. Basically, that was basically coming back from some kind of you can say this, a kind of a Hindu political program in Uttar Pradesh. So these 59 people die, and what follows is absolute mayhem. The pogrom in Gujarat, where officially the government says, that some 1,169 people died, but unofficial records say that more than 2,000 people, predominantly Muslims, were killed. Village after village, there was pillage, there was plunder, there was rape. And I think you would have recently read that one of the most gruesome cases was this gang rape of this woman called Bilkis Banu, which also there were children and women who were also killed in that incident, and they actually got convicted. This is part of the 2002 pogrom. But the state government and the central government came together and actually have released them, premature release of these convicted rapists and murderers. So that's the kind of, incident that took place over there. After that, of course, like I said in the beginning, Modi did come in for some bit of flack from the international order. He was not allowed to fly to the US, if I remember correctly. And and it's the corporates who basically came to his aid. And the person who kind of really orchestrated this entire support from the capitalist lobby was Gautam Adani, who tried to create that kind of legitimization for Modi. So you then have the following year election taking place and BJP coming back with a thumping majority. And what then follows is a series of pro-corporate policies, pro-corporate laws. You look at social expenditure, particularly on health and education, dipping. And you also have increased caste atrocities and, of course, a very, very, very vicious communal polarization, the othering of the Muslims and the Christians that take place. In fact, that actually marks the entire reign of Modi. And that continues, till 2014. So from 2002 to 2014, Modi basically consolidates his entire hold over the BJP by being the undisputed leader of the BJP in Gujarat, and slowly then transforming to the national plane. And just to even for us to understand how Modi came to power in 2014. So basically, it was within the BJP, he created a situation where it was inevitable that he would be the prime ministerial candidate. That every other person who was capable was sidelined. That's the kind of role that he played at that point. But there are other also objective kind of causes for BJP's ascent to power and Modi becoming the prime minister. Firstly, at that point in 2014, it was 10 years of a Congress-led government, coalition government, which at the end of which there was an economic downturn. And of course, it was a regime that was marred by corruption. So you'd remember that there were these massive anti-corruption rallies that had broken out around the country, which basically delegitimized the Congress party completely. And the media played a very, very big role in that. And of course, the RSS mobilized its entire cadre in those entire protests. So Congress lost its position as the natural leader of the ruling classes. So they were looking for an alternative. What better alternative than Modi, who displayed over the 10 years that he was the chief minister, that he would do anything for the corporates. And you also then had the middle class, which had this kind of clamoring for this very strong leader. This very offhand people would say, yeah, India needs a dictator now. I remember those conversations at that time. So all of these issues, all of these came together and catapulted Modi to the central stage and the prime ministership of this nation.
Yeah, that's. I think you've given a very kind of good sort of overview. I guess a rise to power, and I guess I want to kind of hear a bit more of a summary in general. I guess because now there is starting to be criticism of Modi within the international community. I mean, even when he visited, there was a certain level of kind of criticism, especially from mainstream sort of human rights organisations. And I guess, what can you tell us about, in terms of the contemporary, like today, we obviously know about Modi's history, as you sort of covered there, but what about his current sort of track record on human rights and democracy, which I guess he's been increasingly being described as an autocratic, right-wing, Hindi, chauvinist government, which threatens very much to overturn India's foundation as a secular republic.
Yeah, actually, I think, the reason I also gave a bit of a background is one really needs to understand his trajectory to place in context where he is today. So basically, you have Modi's rise, which is the persona, which is very authoritarian, but there's an ideology, which is Hindutva. So, it's these two that kind of, sustained his power as a chief minister and brought him to the center. I think here, there's a very important thing that we need to understand. If you look at the freedom struggle of our country throughout the British, the colonial past, we normally say, that democracy perhaps is the biggest gain that we got from the freedom struggle, because hitherto it was, before the colonial past came, of course, it was feudal, it was, you had rulers, etc. But so the democracy, as a concept, was something that you gain from the freedom struggle. It's something that we cherish, in terms of as the legacy of our freedom struggle. Now, the RSS does not feel the same way, because the RSS does not agree with this kind of a democracy, and Modi obviously from those tables does not too. Now, what do you mean by democracy? When we speak about a democracy, you generally say democracy means that you have regular elections. You have, basically all sections of society are treated equally. You would also talk about freedom of speech and expression, the freedom to organize, the freedom to protest. You would also talk about, an independent media, and you would talk about a judiciary, which is there to ensure that, that the executive stays within the four corners of the Constitution. Now, that's our general understanding, but in the Indian context, you also need to understand that somebody like Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, who is the architect of the Indian Constitution, came from an oppressed community, from a marginalized community. He was a Dalit himself, who faced serious oppressions in his life. And then when he, through his sheer grit, determination and struggle, he came to occupy a very important space in Indian politics, even at that time, during the freedom struggle. So when the time came, as to what our country should be once we are free, the task of designing that document, what we know as the Constitution today, was given to Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. Now, he had a very interesting thing to say from his own social position, and of course, the kind of amazing knowledge that he gathered through his life. He said that there are certain conditions that are precedent for any any democracy, for a working democracy. One would be that there cannot be inequality, social or economic, in society for a democracy to succeed. Secondly, you would need an opposition, an opposition which is strong, which can hold the other powers accountable. You'd also need equality in law. You'll need what you call constitutional morality. Basically, that the Constitution occupies center place and we all abide by the Constitution and its values. He warned at that time itself, there cannot be the tyranny of the majority over the minority. And this he meant not just in the religious sense, this he meant also in the caste sense, that you cannot have the tyranny of the dominant caste over the other caste. He also said that you need a public conscience for a functional democracy, which means that you are affected as an individual, as a citizen, as a resident of this country by any injustice that you see around you. Now, but what do you have today? Today you have the BJP, which has come to power, which basically espouses the ideology of the RSS, makes a mockery of the constitution at any given point in time. I'm not sure if you had occasion to see the recent inauguration of the new parliament building in Delhi. It was just a few days back, which basically became the spectacle, a complete spectacle. It was almost like the coronation of a king. So the constitution, the entire notion of separation of powers, of secularism, of the will of the people, etc., everything was cast aside in this just one act, where you had religious leaders, you had the Swamijis, basically Pandits, walking around in parliament, doing homas, pujas, so on and so forth, and literally crowning Modi as the king. That's how we would look at it. The other thing that we're seeing now is that the basic constitutional values, whether it's secularism, federalism, etc., every single thing is under attack. Now, India practices a very different form of secularism. It's not like the American form of secularism or even the French form of secularism, which is a strict separation. Here, it is an equal treatment of all religions. But today, Hindu majoritarianism is common sense. Hindu majoritarianism is common sense in politics. It is what is pushed through by the RSS and the Modi government. So when you have that kind of a situation, any kind of a dissent, especially ideological dissent, is completely clamped down upon. So you have draconian laws, which, where basically you can throw a person into jail, and that person will have to prove that, that there is no prima facie case against them for them to even get bail. So you're going to languish in jail for months or for years on end. So you have some of the brightest minds of our country, young minds of our country, who are part of various struggles, including the the communal citizenship law struggles that took place over here, who are languishing in jail even till today. So basically, any dissent is going to be clamped down upon. You also have a situation where so-called institutions of public agencies, whether it's the police, whether it's the your tax authorities, your enforcement directorate, etc., each of which is again deployed against political opponents. And you also have the unprecedented communal polarization. I mean, I can't tell you, sometimes one starts to wonder, what it means to be a Muslim. How do you live as a Muslim in this country? Given the constant demonization, the constant everyday attack on every single aspect of Muslim life and livelihood. And that is the kind of polarization that we're seeing. And alongside that, you also have a privatization of violence. So the RSS has several organizations and that it has spawned, some of which are ultra violent, and you have these organizations taking law into their hands. So, for instance, you had lynchings of Muslims across the country. You have situations where on Sundays, where Christians are gathered for their prayers, for their mass, you'll have a bunch of, these Hindu-supremacist organizations barging in, saying that you cannot pray over there, that you're converting Hindus to Christianity, beating them up, and then the police, of course, will come and arrest the pastors or the priest, as it were. There's no action taken against the supremacists in that sense. So you have this literally a collapse of how you would understand a functional democracy to be. Now the media basically parrots. It's not just parroting what the Hindutva line. It basically is pushing the Hindutva line. It's communalizing people. It's creating divisions in society. So if you have an incident where, say, I'll give you a small example. The past violence against women is a very serious problem in the country. So if there is there's a violence against women, say there's a rape, murder, where the perpetrator is a Muslim, that particular crime will become national news. And the identity of the perpetrator, the Muslim identity of the perpetrators, what will be? It will be drummed up over and over again so as to create a kind of an impression that all Muslims are rapists and murderers. But at the same time, there would be, murders and rapes by other communities. But that just, slips. So you have the media that's playing this entire this kind of a role, and the judiciary has not played the role of defending, being the sentinel of constitutional values and human rights and the fundamental rights of people. So it is a matter of concern. And I mean, this may paint a very bleak picture, but the fact remains that even in each of these realms of each of these institutions, you do have a fight back as well. You have people who are on the streets, who are fighting. So there is that pushback that is happening. But overall, the ultimate desire appears to be to undo any sense of constitutional morality, to make redundant any constitutional value that exists at this point in time. That is the scale of attack that is.
Yeah, and I guess in saying everything you're saying about the Modi government and its kind of track record on human rights, I mean, your organisation, the CPI-ML, Communist Party of India, Marxist-Leninist Liberation, and we've also seen other sections of the left have even made this argument, although maybe more internationally. But the Modi BJP government has very much been increasingly described as fascist. And I guess, why do you argue that this is the case? And can you give more, and you can even give a bit more detail on the broader political role, which I think you've covered actually quite a bit, but in relation to this, why does the Modi BJP government is in a sense fascist?
Yeah, see, I mean, again, there are 2 points I'd like to make here. One is whether you call it fascist or not. The point is that these elements of its rule is something that is acknowledged. Each of these elements is something, no one has any dispute on that. That, okay, this is the manner in which this particular regime is playing itself out. Its attack on society, its attack on the constitution, its attack, on the secular fabric, on all institutions of accountability and democracy. Everyone accepts this. But some organizations, some parties are reluctant to say that this amounts to fascism. I would imagine, that's also because if you were to look at it, historically, as a reactionary, ideological political trend where capitalism is in crisis, the traditional way in which we understand fascism, say in the 1920s and 30s, you can't wait for that to replay itself today. Obviously, fascism has different features in different governments, in different countries. It will have its own kind of local peculiarities. Now, for us, what we are saying is you put all of this together, and what you have is fascism in India. You put all of these features together, which I just described, and inevitably, that is the Indian brand of fascism. You cannot, to say that only if the 1920s and 30s, the Nazi or the Mussolini kind of fascism, the way we understood it, only that is fascism. I think that may be erroneous. But having said that, I think, it's okay. You call it what you want. But the point remains that this is the challenge that we have before us. The point remains that we have to accept one thing, that this is not business as usual. This is not another party of the ruling class. To say that, okay, the Congress is also a party of the ruling class, the BJP is also a party, is of the ruling class, I think that's where we cannot make the mistake. There is a substantial difference over here. This is a party which is backed by an ideology, which is Hindutva. This is a party that has an ideological basis. It has an ideological fountainhead in the RSS. It's backed by private militia groups who will not think twice to take law into their hands, to kill people, to plunder, to do anything at all. This is a party that has actively spoken out against the constitution and talks about replacing the constitution. So there's several aspects of this regime which set it out from other ruling class regimes, like say that of the Congress. So we are saying that this unabashed crony capitalism, this kind of a subservience to imperialism, aggressive majoritarianism, the dismantling of the constitution, relentless attacks on dissent, relentless attacks on the minorities, and relentless attacks on the working class. All of this together, is the Indian brand of fascism.
And I guess as you kind of described, you've described the kind of autocratic kind of nature of the Modi government, and the fact, obviously, one of the most important things as well is the fact that there is, as you kind of alluded to before, there is resistance to this, to the Modi BJP government. And I guess, what can you tell us, about some of this resistance by the oppressed and workers against the BJP government, including probably one of the most recent things that is obviously been dominating the headlines in Indian politics has been the recent protests led by female wrestlers who are demanding the arrest of the president of the Wrestling Federation of India, who they allege has sexually harassed 7 female wrestlers over more than a decade. And of course, probably one of the insane things to sort of look, from an outsider sort of perspective, looking at that, it is quite insane to even think that you'd have a ruling political party basically openly kind of defend someone who has been accused in a position of power openly, who has sexually harassed women. So I guess what you can comment about, some of that resistance that has been happening in response against the BJP government.
Yeah, I guess basically I think one of the distinctive features of any regime which is populist, sense of authoritarianism, is that it speaks on behalf of the people. It says, I know what you want. I know what is necessary, what is required by the people. It'll speak to the people, but it speaks for the people. That's the essence. Now, Modi especially has that, it's a sense of arrogance. It's all of that, this entire intellect, this ideological arrogance, plus this, having political power. So it's almost, you feel you're, invincible. So it also means that you're not going to listen to people. But I think the people have been speaking for a long time now. There have been several protests. I think after 2014, when Modi came to power, the kind of the kind of paralysis that was there in the minds, it's all lifted now. So whether it is students protesting across the country on various issues, including the new education policy, whether it's landless laborers protesting, whether it's Adivasis, the original inhabitants of this country protesting against various projects, you're seeing this. There is now rising resistance across the country. And perhaps I think, one of the most remarkable fights came from the farmers, who for 1 year stood outside, basically occupied all the borders of Delhi. It was literally an encirclement of Delhi that took place, where more than 3-4 lakh of farmers from the country went, set up their sheds around Delhi, demanding that the union government, the Modi government, withdraw the 3 anti-farmer laws that it had passed. You follow that, right, Jacob? You've seen that entire struggle, which basically was more than 3 lakh people who went, just lived outside Delhi, saying, till you withdraw that law, we are not going to go back. More than 800 farmers died in that protest, died of cold, died of heat, died of, some various other ailments, various things, because they were living there. More than 3-4 lakh farmers living there with their families, saying, till you withdraw the laws, we're not going to go back. 800 of them martyred. And finally, the Modi government had to give in. It had to give in, and those laws had to be withdrawn. And I'd say that that's one of the, as a political activist in this country, it's one of the most inspiring struggles that one has seen. We also saw workers fight back when Modi announced the lockdown. The lockdown during COVID was announced within 4 hours. Basically, he appeared on TV and said, after 4 hours, no one can go anywhere. No one can come out of the house for the next 2 weeks. You just have to stay there. It's a complete lockdown. The entire country went into lockdown. But workers who didn't have food to eat, workers who were desperate to get back to their houses, took to the streets. There were protests that took place. In Modi's own state, in Gujarat, in the city called Surat, there were rioting that took place over there. And of course, the police used heavy force to crush that entire resistance. So you also saw, even in the middle of this COVID lockdown, workers standing up and fighting. I must also tell you that the Modi government has also, these are not labor law reforms. It's basically restructured labor law to make it pro-capital. It's basically going to take workers back to a situation where basic rights are going to be denied to them. Now, it's in the form of 4 labor codes. The Modi government has still today, it's passed those labor codes in parliament. It has still not been able to put those codes into force, because the workers have been protesting left, right, and center, saying we will not accept it. And then, of course, now you have the struggle of the wrestlers. It's a matter of, it's really, it's very inspiring to see these wrestlers who are all Olympic. Some of them are Olympic medal winners. They've brought great sporting glory to the country, and they filed complaints previously saying that see this man, the chief of this wrestling federation has sexually arrested 7 people over the past 10 years. One of them, in fact, is a minor girl, and despite that, the government does not take any action against them. They have a protest. They actually go to the Supreme Court, and after they go to the Supreme Court, 2 FIRs have been filed against this man, but he's still not been arrested. Here, I think what we're seeing is that this is not the first time where we're seeing somebody from the ruling party, from the BJP, being accused of rape and being protected. We've also seen the BJP give tickets to people who have been accused of terror acts, like Pragya Thakuran, who's now sitting in parliament. So their hubris is such that they will not bow down. So the government has taken the stand that whatever you do, we're not going to take action. You go to court, FIR, the Supreme Court will direct us, we will register an FIR. Beyond that, we're not going to take action. But these wrestlers, I think, have really stuck to their guns. A remarkable mobilization is now taking place around it, where student organizations, women organizations, various other political parties have all gone and expressed their solidarity. Yesterday, I must tell you that, there were protests even across the country. There's a series of protests that have been planned on 3rd as well. So up to 5th, various groups, basically across the country now, the joint trade union, basically the central trade unions, which has a coordination committee. These are the biggest trade unions in the country. Or the joint committee of these trade unions have issued a call that all trade unions should support these wrestlers and go on protest. The farmers have their own coordination committee across the country. Their organization has given a call for protests between 3rd to 5th. Student organizations have also given a call that they are all in support of these wrestlers, and they're also going in protest. So now again, we're seeing a mass surge of protests against the the protection that the Modi government is giving to this man. Lastly, I must tell you, all of these protests are taking place, and the new Parliament House building was inaugurated on 28th of May. On that day, these wrestlers said that they're going to have a big protest. They were brutally beaten up and arrested, and cases have been filed against them. While the Modi government invited the perpetrator of the sexual harassment to the inauguration of the new Parliament House. So there's a picture now, a photo of this man, Brijbhushan, standing right in front of the new Parliament House in this white outfit of his, while the corresponding picture is of these wrestlers all being arrested.
All right. Well, thanks for that, Clifton. We'll go and conclude this this interview. But I guess, do you have any kind of final comments that you would like to make, especially ahead of the Ecosocialism conference where you'll be speaking at?
I think basically the challenge across the globe, I think, is when we say that democracy is in a crisis. Democracy is at peril. Our fights as a party, our understanding is the fight is not for a status quo ante. It's not to go back to the kind of democracy that existed, which itself was inadequate. I think for us, the question is also, how do we fight and how do we get to a point where a proletarian democracy actually becomes a reality? Those are the paths that we need to look for. So, for instance, the kind of struggles that are happening even in our country, which are very, very inspirational. So the fight against Modi or this kind of a fascist kind of regime is not against an individual. It's against an ideology. So that doesn't only mean, that it's a fight for communal harmony. It's a fight for annihilation of caste. It's a question of class struggle. It's a fight against crony capitalism. It's a fight for dismantling patriarchy, so on and so forth. So I would imagine that is the imagination, that is something that we all need to bear in mind in our struggles, wherever we are fighting these kinds of regimes.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Clifton. And I think we're all looking forward to hearing you speak at the Ecosocialism 2023, a World Beyond Capitalism conference. Clifton D'Rozario will be speaking on the panel, "The Fight for Democracy in India, Is Modi Fascist?"
I hope you got a lot out of this episode. To continue producing shows like this, we need your support. Consider becoming a supporter for $5 a month, sharing this show on social media, and submitting your own stories. You can do all this at our website, greenleft.org.au.